And there's war in the Reform Party in British politics. International viewers may not have much of a handle on this, but in the time-honoured fashion of such people, the Reform bandwagon is coming off its wheels as two of the discarded former senior lieutenants of the founder and leader Nigel Farage prepare to form a new party which may or may not have big bucks behind it from Elon Musk, the man that rules the internet, at least for now. More of that later, but bigger and more important things must occupy us in this opening monologue. In the last hour, Iran has quote-unquote militarised the Straits of Hormuz, through which fully 40% of the world's petroleum is exported. And without that oil trade, the economies of the Western world would grind quickly to a halt. Forget about expensive petrol at the pumps. There wouldn't be any petrol at all. So a matter of some moment. What is the proximate reason for it? Well, it is the growing conviction that having moved a second aircraft carrier into the Persian Gulf and listened carefully to what Donald Trump says and doesn't say, the Iranians believe that the attack upon them will come not from Israel, which is, of course, superbly vulnerable to counter-attack, as Iran showed twice over the last year and a half, but from the United States itself. The big enchilada is coming. That's what the Iranians believe. And it's not helped by Scott Ritter, the one and only Scott Ritter, who in somewhat peculiar post in the last few minutes has laid out what would be Donald Trump's case for doing so. He says that it has no relevance that Israel has nuclear weapons. Well, that depends what end of the telescope you're looking through. Because if you're Iranian and you're being openly threatened by a country which illegally holds hundreds of nuclear weapons, it is highly relevant indeed. Scott Ritter explains, and we're grateful to him for it, that the United States has low-yield nuclear weapons. I don't know what a low-yield nuclear weapon looks like. Is it Hiroshima or somewhere between Hiroshima and the 1,000 times greater nuclear power of today's nuclear warheads? Maybe 500, would that be low yield? Maybe 100. That would be, therefore, 100 times more powerful than the bomb at Hiroshima. And moreover, Scott argues that this would be necessary if Trump were to achieve his objective of destroying Iran's nuclear reactors, if it was to destroy Iran's peaceful nuclear industry. I've called it that twice now for a reason. The IAEA and those policing the NPT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran is a signatory to, has been since the time of the Shah, have never reported that Iran was seeking to build nuclear weapons. The Iranian political leadership has repeatedly said that they will not build nuclear weapons. And indeed, there is an outstanding extant fatwa from Khomeini himself that it would be irreligious, blasphemous, to produce nuclear weapons, which are weapons unlimited by time or space. And that would appear not to be good enough for the Trump administration. They believe that Iran is seeking to build a nuclear weapon. I have said many times, I'm going to say it again now, whether you like it or not, if I was leading Iran, I would long ago have furnished myself with a nuclear weapon. Given that I'm being threatened daily, sanctioned, strangled, and warned as to the very existence of my state by not one but two nuclear-armed states, Israel and the United States of America. So I don't know why Iran doesn't want nuclear weapons. I can't be certain that they still do not want them. I can't be certain that they do not even now have them, given that experts say the state of uranium enrichment in Iran is such that within a few days they could put a nuclear warhead on the tip. What I do know is that if the United States bombs Iran with low-yield nuclear weapons, then World War III is a distinct probability, because the Iranians will not take that lying down. Their ballistic missile capability, and for that matter, their anti-aircraft capability, which is largely Russian in origin and state-of-the-art, is more than enough to close the Straits of Hormuz, militarized in just the last hour. It's more than enough to completely destroy the oil and gas installations of all of America's allies in the Persian Gulf. And if you were Iran, you'd do exactly the same. After all, America cannot attack Iran. Israel has not been able to attack Iran except by using the airspace, the waterways, and in the case of Qatar at least, but probably Saudi Arabia also, and the massive American military bases on the soil of Iran's neighbors in the Persian Gulf. So if you were the Iranians, you'd do the same. And I'm certain that they will. That means there'll be no oil or gas to transport through the Straits of Hormuz, because the Saudi fields, the Qatari fields, the fields of the United Arab Emirates would all be destroyed in an instant. All of their oil and gas infrastructure would be destroyed, and indeed much else. I've said to you many times, don't buy a property in Dubai, because Dubai will not exist if America attacks Iran. In other words, we're talking a very, very serious development. The question is the United States going to launch an attack on Iran, knowing, as they must, all of the foregoing, all that I have just adumbrated as the necessary and ineluctable consequences of such an attack? And then there's Israel. It's unlikely that in its retaliatory posture that the Iranians would not strike Israel. After all, they did so with absolute ease twice over the course of the latest Gaza emergency. Over the last year and a half, Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel have been hit by highly combustible ballistic missiles from Iran, which did not have anything like the warhead tip on it that it could have had, and they were fired in very small numbers. If Iran were to let go all of its arsenal with its maximum explosive warhead potential, then Israel too would cease to exist. It would be another Dubai. Given the seriousness of all this, you must be asking yourself, has the world gone mad? Have the leaders of the West gone mad? Well, judging by European performance over the last few weeks, yes, I'm afraid they have. Britain and Germany are effectively now in a state of war with the nuclear-armed superpower with 5,850 nuclear warheads, a country called Russia. The state of war is now moving rapidly to a deployment. The active phase, as Keir Starmer put it, the operational phase, as Keir Starmer put it, is now upon us. That means to say that Britain is about to send troops to Ukraine. This despite the warning from Russia that this would be a declaration of war against them. This despite the obvious that with one single Orishnik missile, non-nuclear, the entire British expeditionary force could be wiped out. It would be very much greater a military setback than it happened in the charge of the Light Brigade, it would be very much more serious than almost anything that the British Armed Forces have faced ever, never mind since the Second World War. Because Keir Starmer says he will respond to any act against British troops in Ukraine with the potential use of British nuclear weapons. Now, there are a number of problems associated with that. First of all, as many technical reports have made clear, Britain does not have operational control over its nuclear weapons. It would have to have the permission and the cooperation of the United States to fire its nuclear weapons at Russia. The British government were boasting this week that they could take out 40 Russian cities. Although that's not true, because as soon as the first Russian city was taken out by British nuclear weapons, Britain would cease to exist. And so the braggadocio of the Starmer government, accused this week by General Kellogg of being in the grip of the worst case of pound shop Churchill impersonation since doughboy Boris Johnson. Keir Starmer is a joke, according to General Kellogg, President Trump's representative on the Russian front. But as soon as we had taken out one Russian city, every single British city would literally cease to exist. That's the balance of power that exists between Britain and Russia, and yet the British government persists in the most nakedly aggressive way to threaten Russia, including to threaten it with nuclear weapons. Well, I am not privy to the thinking in the Kremlin, but I imagine it goes something like this. This Chihuahua, Keir Starmer, just threatened 40 Russian cities with nuclear attack. We better get ready to preemptively stop any possibility of that happening. And so, the reality is that Keir Starmer, who presides over a sinking economy, a society that is ripping itself apart, that cannot agree on anything, which is cold, wet, miserable, and getting poorer and poorer, and going to get much poorer still, according to Keir Starmer. By 2030, every family in Britain will be worse off. Hey, vote for me, I'll make you worse off, said no successful political party ever. The reality is that Britain is outstripped only by Germany in its preparations for war with Russia. Now, the new, or soon-to-be new, German Chancellor has told the German people that they must now spend 800 billion euros more, 800 billion euros more. That's the best part of €1 trillion on weapons of war and preparations for war with Russia. That's the Russia that only 2 years ago was supplying Germany, and had been for decades, with cheap and dependable gas on which their entire industrial and economic strength was built. The German magazine, close to the Prime Minister, new Prime Minister, Chancellor of Germany, warned Germany's youth today that they must be prepared to go to war with Russia. Well, we don't know what might go wrong, because Britain never fought Russia in the nuclear age, not since the 1850s and the Crimean War, but the Germans fought Russia very much more recently than that. Indeed, in the lifetime of some of the people watching this show this very evening. And it did not end well for them. And again, while not privy to thinking in the Kremlin, if I were in the Kremlin, this is what I'd be saying. We made a serious mistake in allowing the reunification of Germany. We made a very serious mistake in allowing our forces to be forced out of the eastern part of Germany. We made a very serious mistake in not ensuring that the verbal promises of the Americans that NATO would not advance 1 inch to the east if we agreed to leave Germany and tear down that wall. We made a very serious set of mistakes with Germany, and we are going to have to prepare for that war that the German government is absolutely determined upon. In other news, Israel continues to massacre Palestinians, massacre them in their thousands. In 51 minutes, 300 Palestinian children were murdered in tents in Gaza this week. I'm telling you that because, well, nobody else will. You have never seen that statistic that I just gave you on any Western newspaper, in any Western television or radio broadcast. It's as if it never happened. Except those of us who know and saw it happening. We saw the parade of limbless and headless children. We saw the fathers laying their babies and infants in the cold earth. We saw the women torn to pieces. We saw the old men hacked to death by razor-sharp steel that fell upon them from American airplanes with devastating ferocity. And we can't unsee it, you see. We can't accept that it can happen without even a murmur of protest from a political class that is actually preparing for war of its own. And so, I've got to declare my own little war. My war against the uniparty in Britain, which is now bigger than two cheeks. It's an arse that is an anatomical miracle. It's an arse with 4 cheeks, actually 5 cheeks. The arse with 5 cheeks is the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Reform Party, and the Scottish Nationalists, who all support the war that's coming with Ukraine, and who all support the war on the Palestinian refugees in Gaza. And so, even if I stand alone, and I do not, but even were I to stand alone, my state of war with those silently complicit, in some cases nakedly complicit, with the genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza, an ongoing Holocaust, is total. It's total war from me, ladies and gentlemen. It's the mother of all talk shows.